Well, the million-dollar question on everybody's mind right now. Is it too late to start homesteading? I don't know. We're going to talk about it. As I said, kind of the million-dollar question right now. Is it too late to homestead? Going one step further, in the face of what otherwise sometimes feels like impending doom. Well, Darren from Thorhaven Farm recently did a video and shared some really good thoughts and insight from his perspective that I think was really, really valuable. And one of the, I guess, most important pieces there was this notion that there's always impending doom. I mean, we say it jokingly often as the catch-all phrase to explain all the bad things that go on in the world, but they never end. There's always something. We are, though, under a lot of pressure, stressors, right now as kind of your average person just trying to make it in the world and feed themselves and their families. So that's really why this question's on everybody's minds. The short answer, I'm going to just go back. There isn't really a short answer. I think the question brings another question to mind. Are we talking about homesteading in the idyllic fashion that a lot of us come to watch on YouTube or think about when we hear that term? Or are we just talking about growing food to feed yourself? Because I think they have different answers and different outcomes.
As Chris said, homesteading has sort of become a catch-all phrase for that romantic notion that we see on YouTube videos and in those old movies, where the girl's leading the Jersey cow down the road to be bred and she's milking every morning, and it just has this romantic feel to it. And I think that is tough. That is a really tough version of homesteading to acquire nowadays. If you're talking just being able to grow your own food, that is achievable. And that is achievable on any scale. Whether you are in town and only have a yard and you're just going to plant some vegetables, maybe do some quail, things like that. But getting out, moving to that big landscape and everything that all comes with that version of homesteading is getting harder and harder to achieve. We don't want to sugarcoat it. I mean, it is hard work. It is really, really hard to get your foot into the door and get started.
So Stephanie said, and as we look at the sheep here, one of the hardest parts is, again, what Darren was talking about, acquiring the land, because even the sheep require land. We were very fortunate, although it happened through a series of unfortunate events, to be in the position we're in. But another part that kind of goes into it, and again, as I'm watching the sheep out here and talking, is changing some mindsets on things. Because, of course, growing food is not necessarily about image or any of those kind of things that tend to go with social media. Growing food is exactly what it is. It's making sure that you are growing enough food items to feed yourself. And depending on where you are, you may have to have a lot of foresight to be able to do that for an entire year. So when we go away from that romantic notion of homesteading and we just want to start talking about growing food, it's not romantic, because the first solution we're going to give is, if you want to grow food, you need to learn how to grow plants. You need to learn how to garden. And obviously there's many other incarnations and ways you can do about it, but that's a very basic skill, and that really will feed you, even in a small area. If all you can do is a few raised beds or even potentially garden indoors, that will amount to a lot. It will also save a lot of money. We've basically proven this in our Homestead Economics series, that by far and large, in a climate where economics and all the other things that are kind of up in the air right now are the way they are, saving money is pretty important, and you can grow thousands of pounds of food with plants. I really can't stress that enough. If I was giving advice to somebody starting, I would say figure out your gardening. Even if you don't necessarily think you like gardening right now, start there. Because the margin of error and the risk of failure is, I'm going to say it, a little bit less. That being said, the other part to this that kind of opens up a major rabbit hole is it's not necessarily as simple as just planting tomatoes, planting potatoes, etc., etc. The other thing you really do need is the skills that go along with it. Things like seed saving, how to preserve it, how to do soils and composting. Those are all sort of secondary skills to the main activity, which is gardening. If you can do those skills, it compounds the benefit that you get. And like I say, you don't necessarily need a massive area, depending on where you are in the world, to be able to grow a lot of food. This is definitely, especially with annuals and biannuals, but you could even extrapolate it to some perennials. When we say that it's not too late to start growing food, learning how to garden is got to be the one skill that you should be learning right now. You should be focusing your efforts on right now to get those skills, to figure out how to do it, because storing hundreds of pounds of seeds in the event of a great catastrophe is still a great idea, and we could go into a whole nother tangent on that, but you don't have the practical skills, and it will take you time to figure this out. So the best time to start growing food, to put it really plainly, is right now. If you're not starting, you should go out, learn what you can. Now is the time to start that. And you can start this on basically any size space. For those of us in the northern hemisphere, we're just on the precipice of this garden season starting. So you're not too late is the short answer there for 2022. But this is life skills that you can build on and take with you no matter where you go. And in the case of annuals, you can take those seeds. If you learn how to save them, you can invest very little money and take it with you. Which I think is huge, because as Darren was saying in his video, there are so many different ways to keep building your endeavors to get to that idealistic homestead life. But don't wait for that. You should really be starting to garden. If nothing else, you should be starting to garden now.
Kind of feeding off of that notion of taking those garden skills and learning those skills now, really focusing on what you're hoping to achieve, what you're hoping to grow, learning how to do that. An example that comes up often in our videos and lives is on tomatoes. And yes, you could grow 500 different kinds of tomatoes and cram them all into a space, but then you're stuck. You're in that system, that cycle of having to go out and get more seeds and things like that, where if it was thought out and planned ahead of time and just focused on a few things and doing them really well, that is where you will find success and you will find sustainability, and you will learn how to take that and transplant it to wherever you end up in this homesteading vision cycle. And that can then be turned full circle onto the livestock, which I think is something that so many people, ourselves included, have gone really, really wrong with, lacking the focus, really honing in on what it is that they really want and not getting distracted by the big flashy lights over here, and staying where is your actual comfort zone. If you go back and watch any of our videos, we started with goats, then we got all flashy, and we went to cows, thinking bigger was better, and it didn't work for us. And it may work for some, it may not. It's a gamble, it's a risk. But one of the things that we learned from that is looking into what we already had and figuring out how to make that work.
The next part of this topic of growing your own food and potentially diverging a bit from sort of homesteading is, of course, animals, because I think this is one of the pieces that is extremely attractive to the homesteading notion, is having animals. Now, what I just said about gardens makes it sound like that narrative of plants and plant-based diets will save the world. And to be honest, there's some truth to that, but I still feel there's a place for animals on any size homestead or any sized area where you're growing food for yourself. I wish there was a term for that aside from homesteading, but there isn't. But animals can be tricky because animals essentially consume. This is where focusing can be really important, because you need to know your resources, and like Stephanie said, your comfort levels, what you're willing to do, what you're capable to do, what your land resources are, also what you need. And you may evaluate that time and time and time again, year after year after year. After doing it for as many years as we have, I would definitely point people towards, even if they have property, I would point people towards some of the smaller livestock, because in some ways they're less risky. Less risky because they usually cost less initially, although it may not feel like it at the time. A herd of rabbits does cost a lot less to feed, purchase, and house than a herd of cows, on the flip side. And not that I'm negative, not that I'm against cows, because if you have the right situation, the right resources, that could be an excellent solution too. It's just, if you've never had animals before, smaller is usually a little easier to manage. So one big thing when it comes to livestock, or one big thing I think people should think about, is livestock can make or break you. And that's a very real potential. Again, smaller livestock, you're less likely to lose your shirt over if something doesn't work, but it's still a really good idea to sit down and rather than kind of succumb to the impulse of, I need to get chickens now, think about what you want the chickens to do for you, how you want to manage them, basically what you want out of them. Growing your own food is basically a lifestyle that our ancestors had no choice but to do. They had to grow food or harvest food. As I stand in our little grow room here, you can do a lot in a small space. And because it's a bit of a lifestyle, you really need to make a choice if you're planning to start growing your own food now, of how to use the space you have and the resources you have. Because you can allocate some pretty small spaces to do a lot of pretty amazing things. Because this really is a lifestyle, and I think that's where the term homesteading probably comes into play most, it's a good lifestyle. And we can totally understand the desire to get into it. But don't let current events, or even though we've sort of explained here, is it going to be easy to get into growing your own food, depending on what you're trying to grow right now? Maybe not. Seeds might not be available. Livestock might not be available. You might not be able to get the dream property that you've always wanted to be able to do it. But we're going to say it again. Don't let that stop you from building skills. Even if you can't completely feed your family. I mean, we aren't even there yet. Even if you can't completely feed your family from your homestead, that's a great goal, but it will take time to get there. You absolutely have to build skills. And if you're not already homesteading, or better, growing your own food, you need to start, because you need those skills. Year after year after year, you will get more and more and more skills and more experience, and that's what you fundamentally need. No matter where you are right now, you need to be learning. We're still learning. We may be quote-unquote experts in some areas, but there's other areas of growing our own food that we're still just learning about. So keep that in mind. We're all at different points, and never stop learning and building those skills, because those skills are vital.
So as you've seen in this video, we've shown using a 6x8 grow room, which has so much potential. And if you're in a small space, that might be what you have. You may use the front yard of your townhouse. You may use a variety of things to grow your own food. Is that homesteading? Homesteading is kind of an open for interpretation word, in my opinion, because there's so many different thoughts on it out there. Even if your end goal is that dream farm with the rolling hills and walking the dairy cow, you need to start now. You need to start somewhere. You need to make what you have start working for you and helping to teach you how to do those things and develop those skills. I'm going to reference out of Darren's video earlier this week. Plant the tree. It doesn't matter if you're going to be there in 20 years' time or not. You might be, and you'll be glad you planted the tree. You have to go watch his video to see what I'm talking about, because I can't remember what country it was. But really, it is coming down to all you really need to focus on is growing your own food. The moral of this video is that you need to start something now. as Chris would say, in the wake of impending doom, our hope and survival stands on starting something now. But I think that is kind of the conclusion to this video. It's just a little bit of food for thought, or thought for food.